This podcast is supported by Google. Hey folks, Stephen Johnson here, co-founder of Notebook LM. As an author, I've always been obsessed with how software could help organize ideas and make connections. So we built Notebook LM as an AI-first tool for anyone trying to make sense of complex information. Upload your documents, and Notebook LM instantly becomes your personal expert, uncovering insights and helping you brainstorm. Try it at notebooklm.google.com.
Hello, and welcome back to the Cognitive Revolution. Today, I'm excited to share part 2 of my conversation with Illia Polosukhin, co-author of the seminal Attention is All You Need paper and founder of NEAR Protocol, which describes itself as the blockchain for AI and aims to build a future where AI belongs to everyone. In part 1, we explored the foundational technology stack, proof-of-stake consensus mechanisms, confidential computing on GPUs, and NEAR's plan to train frontier models on a decentralized basis, with contributions incentivized by cryptographically guaranteed revenue shares. Today, we zoom out from the enabling technology and discuss the big picture questions. What does personal computing look like as AI continues to eat traditional UI-centric software? Illia envisions a unified intelligence layer that works across all of your devices, predicts what you need, and proactively gets things done for you. How will this change the nature of markets, trade, and the consumer economy? Illia expects that advertising and middlemen will become less relevant as AI agents allow buyers and sellers to connect directly at unprecedented scale. What does daily life look like, and how will we spend our time in the era of AI-provided abundance? In addition to a rise in personalized AI-generated entertainment products, Illia predicts that people will find meaning and compete for status in small communities focused on niche interests, including athletics, video games, the collection and curation of unique artifacts, and who knows what else. What rules should govern agent-to-agent interactions in this world? Illia imagines a symbiotic relationship between individual humans and their own personal AIs, such that humans and AIs effectively grow up together. And he believes that AIs should pursue the interests of their individual humans, even if that means being less than fully transparent when negotiating with other AIs on their humans' behalf. And finally, what new governance mechanisms could allow us to take advantage of the exponential increase in information processing power and reasoning that AI affords us? Illia describes NEAR's experiments with AI delegates, which vote on behalf of token holders, who in turn select them based on their decision-making frameworks, and also describes NEAR's long-term goal of enabling every individual to have their own AI that participates in governance on their behalf. Of course, we touch on lots more along the way as well, including the role of formal verification of software in securing smart contracts, the remaining challenges required to effectively bridge the gap between low-level guarantees and high-level human intentions, and the need to harden society's defenses in order to maintain global biosecurity in the presence of broadly distributed, powerful AI systems. Overall, while many questions remain to be answered, Illia's strength as a systems-level thinker spanning technology, economics, social dynamics, and governance is evident throughout. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy one of the most concrete, positive visions for the future that you will find anywhere. From Illia Polosukhin, founder of NEAR. Illia Polosukhin, founder of NEAR, welcome back to the Cognitive Revolution.
Thanks for having me back.
I'm excited for part 2. So last time we talked a lot about foundational technology, the journey that you went on from being an author of Attention is All You Need to try to source data from contributors around the world, struggling to pay them, taking a detour into blockchain, thinking it would take just a few months. Here we are a few years later, and it's all really happening. Anybody who's listened to this feed for more than a minute knows that I often say the scarcest resource is a positive vision for the future. And I appreciate that you have one. So I'm really appreciative that you're taking a second window here to help us unpack that. I guess maybe for starters, one of the jumping off points last time was you said you wanted to teach computers to code. And sure enough, now they can code. So maybe as we kind of ramp up into a vision of like potentially a quite different future, how is the rise of AI coding assistants changing how you guys work, and how is it changing like who can create stuff on top of the blockchain?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's even about blockchain per se, but yeah, the real reason why I always thought that as computers are able to code, we actually approaching a different world, because there's few dimensions to this, right? We know that there was a statement by Mark Andreessen, right, that software is eating the world, right? And this idea was like that effectively, I mean, what it means is automation. Automation has always been the driver of innovation, of GDP, of productivity. And, it's like everything from tractors to factories to then indeed computers, and computers kind of this like kind of universal, bicycle of the mind, right? Automating things. And so now the challenge been that there's always been like a small cohort of people who actually are able to build software, right? And so if I have a need, right, I need to find somebody else to build it. Probably they need to build it not just for me, but for a large number of people, so it's actually economical. And so like we've ended up with a lot of like software that became very complex to use. And so now you need to learn how to use it, because it's not really built for you. It's built kind of for, the generic user that has like, every user has like 5 use cases that they like somewhat overlap. And so it's all of this is like kind of stacked in one software, right? Or you just don't have it and you keep doing stuff manually and kind of, wasting your time. And so for me, the ability for machines to code is really about that transformation where everyone now is able to build their personal software. Everyone now is able to build their own personal automation. And it also kind of removes the fact that like the interfacing, right? That these interfaces need to show you all the options right away, right? You kind of can sub-select with, English or whatever into the part of the interface that you need, right? So to give you very specific examples, right? I mean, I like the example of Salesforce, right? Salesforce, I mean, obviously started as like a small startup that was targeting like a specific use case of salespeople. But at this point, right, it's a monstrosity that like you need to hire somebody else to configure Salesforce for you, right? Like that's how complex the Salesforce is, right? At this point, it's effectively like you're hiring somebody else to build you a system, right? It's just like they're using existing pre-built components. Now imagine this world now where you can, just talk to a computer. Like it's really now becomes about your sales process, about your business process, about how you want to automate, what reports you want, et cetera, right? It can be dynamic. You can restructure this as you go. You can whatever built-in things that Salesforce may have somewhere as a feature or may not even have. And then you can integrate with whatever other tools you want. Like for example, Salesforce, we're in crypto, everything is in Telegram. Salesforce doesn't have a Telegram integration. We can't use it, right? So now we need to go and somebody to get built integrations in Telegram and Salesforce. But, with your vibe coded CRM, you can just like, hey, and integrate Telegram for this. So that's this is just like a simple example, and we can keep extrapolating, right? It's every single kind of our, let's say, digital footprint, right, is kind of becoming more and more automated, right? And the more intelligence computer can have and more it can take on, the more you can offload the kind of orchestration of different tools or just low level, here's a database, I need an HR tool, I need CRM, I need this, I need that, right? You can actually build all of that. So that's been, this is in 2017, we were like, hey, software as a service is going to die. AI will replace it. In 2017, this sounded like, very delusional. That was probably the... But obviously, I think now we see that most people are kind of, or a lot of people agree, and then the software service itself is trying to become AI because they know they kind of going to just get out-competed by that. So coming back to your question, like what changes in our work, I think there's few pieces that are, already clearly work, right? Kind of data analysis through natural language, right? If you have like kind of reasonable data structure, you can like now give, like you can effectively make everyone, maybe not a data scientist, but like what before would require like a business analyst person, right? And then it would take them a while to like pull all the data. Now you can just say like, oh, you have a question about the business analytics information. just ask it. Like, you don't need to email somebody to get you the answer, right? You just ask it to the tool. It, generates SQL queries, pulls in whatever data, writes some Python, gives you an answer, right? I think I'm actually a big fan of the front end building with vibe coding now. And though I'm not writing production code anymore, but it's really useful for me as a prototype tool where you can effectively just really quickly get to an experience. And so you don't need you want design to be more about like style guides, etc. But like the UX part, you can test really quickly, right? Before a designer would, maybe design something and then developer would try to build it. And again, it's like, oh shit, I can't actually build that, or like it doesn't work exactly this way. And there's like a lot of iterations. Now, even designers can just build a full experience, fully clickable thing. It generates code for this. And now developers can just plug in all the backend logic. I think also we're starting to see on our teams that actually doing development that the time spent is changing. Before, you spend a lot of time on kind of the development work, and then you spend also a lot of time on reviewing other people's work. The amount of time spent on development is shrinking, right? Because you effectively tell the whatever course or codex, whatever this is, to go and do the thing. And a lot more time spent on reviewing things and making sure they're correct, right? Now, one thing we were experimenting with on one of the teams was, what if we decompose the whole piece, this is, for simple software right now, AI works, right? For complex software, it doesn't, right? It doesn't really go, you're gonna just go and build me a really complex system and it goes and does it. It doesn't work yet. We see obviously the improvements continuously. And so right now for complex systems, you right now decompose it yourself, right? As an architect or senior engineer. And then you have maybe a few different team members who actually build the subsystems. And before, in traditional software development, you always want to have multiple people on each subsystem that you want them to know really well how it works so they can maintain it, so they can change it. Now, actually, it's not as important because AI will explain to you how it works. And you may actually even have a natural language explanation that the developer used to build it in the first place attached to it. And so it's actually more about velocity and reviewing process, and then how to ensure that each part is secure and kind of works correctly. And so there's kind of a transition happening where there's more almost like individualism because every individual is more productive. And then it's more about how to build the right decomposition into pieces. Again, this is a very also temporary in a way, but this is kind of the current state, right? And so as tools become more mature, they are better at larger code base, navigation, etc. I think the other question is, it's really about the model quality for a specific task, for the conceptually the abstraction level that it needs to operate on, right? So again, front end, there's no abstraction level, right? You just kind of build what you see, right? And you kind of iterate. So it's really easy to check. It's really easy to iterate. So you don't really need that much, and models are good at this. When we talk about a blockchain low-level code, right, it's extremely complex system. There's a lot of pieces, externalities, so models are not very good at that. And kind of there you really expect people to spend more time, and in general you spend more time thinking about the algorithm and architecture than writing code. So yeah, so it really depends and kind of, but this is also all shifting really quickly. 6 months ago I wouldn't given you a different answer, right? And I'm sure in 6 months it will be different as well.
Yeah, we've seen some very impressive programming results from frontier companies that have not yet hit the the public APIs or product surfaces just yet. So certainly we can bank on more to come. When it comes to, you mentioned job titles, I think you said senior engineer or architect. That raises the question I think a lot of people are asking right now. Are you hiring junior engineers? What do you think is the fate of the junior engineer as things stand today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's less about like junior engineer. It's more about who is that person, right? If this is somebody who is like coming in, like, for example, by the time I got into university, I already been coding for 7 years, right? And this is when I got, my first job, etc. So like, if this is somebody coming in who's like, built multiple projects already, using AI every day, etc., like, it doesn't matter if junior or not junior, right? It's really, there's a lot of skills for them to learn, but like, they're there to learn them, right? They're open, they're ready to go. And then you have some people who coming in who like, like studied a bunch in university, but like not really in this learning mindset, and like, this is going to be continuously changing things. And like, you're like, so, like, again, we're transitioning from like software as a like craft to really be just like a problem solvers that talk to computers, right? And so you need, problem solving at the end is really all about kind of like the mindset and then the approach. And so if people are willing and are kind of doing that and excited about that, that's, if people are like, oh, I don't know how to do this, I can't do this, etc., then that's not the right person. So yeah, so it really depends on like it. For many things before, yeah, you would hire like a bunch of junior developers because they're cheaper and you don't need maybe as like high quality of work and you want to fan out work. That part is not needed, yeah. So you hiring more for like the problem solving and kind of more people who can actually like creatively problem solve together.
Yeah, there's always a space, there's always room for people who are like a force of nature unto themselves.
Exactly, yeah.
Overall, that sounds bearish for rank and file. Like, I was told that if I, get
studies this bootcamp, I'm gonna pay $100K, yeah. Yeah, I think that's true about every job at this point. Maybe plumbers and electricians. That's the, like, I usually talk like the automation right now happening from two sides. All of the like manufacturing, like on the floor jobs are getting automated, and like that price is still pretty high actually. Like, yeah, Vietnam, for example, salaries are probably lower than what robots are getting paid in the US. But in US, it's already like, there's this company I know called Formic. They effectively provide you outstaffing with robots. You're a factory, you call them up, they bring you robots, they install them, they set them up. You don't need to do anything, you just pay them effectively as you pay salary, but they work 24/7, they don't complain, they don't unionize, they just, do the job, they don't quit. Like right now in US, the churn of workforce is 300%, meaning like every year, you need to hire 3 people for one job because like they keep quitting. So that's like the automation from the like bottom kind of low skill, very repetitive task. And then finally, all of the kind of white collar, high end jobs are getting automated, like, coding, lawyers, like a lot of this information work, right, getting automated. And so the most safe right now, it's going to get automated as well, but is actually the high dexterity kind of skilled work that requires like, I don't know, plumber, you need to like climb under the sink and like, fit something. Like stuff like this right now is just like super hard to do with AI. But again, this will happen as well. Like all of those things will get automated over time.
Yeah, it's coming for all of us. It's just a question of when.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
The worst thing about automation is how often it breaks. You build a structured workflow, carefully map every field from step to step, and it works in testing. But when real data hits or something unexpected happens, the whole thing fails. What started as a time saver is now a fire you have to put out. Tasklet is different. It's an AI agent that runs 24/7. Just describe what you want in plain English. Send a daily briefing, triage support emails, or update your CRM. And whatever it is, Tasklet figures out how to make it happen. Tasklet connects to more than 3,000 business tools out of the box, plus any API or MCP server. It can even use a computer to handle anything that can't be done programmatically. Unlike ChatGPT, Tasklet actually does the work for you. And unlike traditional automation software, it just works. No flowcharts, no tedious setup, no knowledge silos where only one person understands how it works. Listen to my full interview with Tasklet founder and CEO Andrew Lee. Try Tasklet for free at tasklet.ai and use code COGREV to get 50% off your first month of any paid plan. That's code COGREV at tasklet.ai. AI's impact on product development feels very piecemeal right now. AI coding assistants and agents, including a number of our past guests, provide incredible productivity boosts. But that's just one aspect of building products. What about all the coordination work, like planning, customer feedback, and project management? There's nothing that really brings it all together. Well, our sponsor of this episode, Linear, is doing just that. Linear started as an issue tracker for engineers, but has evolved into a platform that manages your entire product development lifecycle. And now they're taking it to the next level with AI capabilities that provide massive leverage. Linear's AI handles the coordination busy work, routing bugs, generating updates, grooming backlogs. You can even deploy agents within Linear to write code, debug, and draft PRs. Plus, with MCP, Linear connects to your favorite AI tools, Claude, Cursor, ChatGPT, and more. So what does it all mean? Small teams can operate with the resources of much larger ones, and large teams can move as fast as startups. There's never been a more exciting time to build products, and Linear just has to be the platform to do it on. Nearly every AI company you've heard of is using Linear, so why aren't you? To find out more and get 6 months of Linear Business for free, head to linear.app/TCR. That's linear.app/TCR for 6 months free of Linear Business. So I want to understand a little bit better, because I think a big part of your vision of the future, obviously, is AI that everyone owns, right? We've kind of got the one default path, it seems, in front of us where we have like the big tech singularity, which is where like 3 to 7 companies, become like totally dominant forces because they have the models that ran away from everyone else and nobody else does. And so, we're all just kind of trying to get whatever inference we can get from these leaders. And then there's your vision of the decentralized and collectively owned AI that I think has a lot to say for it. It's certainly super attractive in a lot of ways for people, with some concerns about, what happens if everybody has, access to certain things in an unrestricted way too. But leaving that aside, if front end is like largely, we can get the AIs to do it, but like core blockchain work is beyond what they can do, what's in the middle? Like, what kind of apps are people building on the blockchain today? How hard is it to build those apps? What makes it hard? And can the AIs help there yet? Or if not yet, at what point should we start to see an explosion of like vibe coded on blockchain applications? Like what's the fundamental barrier or kind of rate limiting step toward the proliferation of, just anybody who has an idea for blockchain can go do it in the same way that anyone who has an idea right now, to a significant extent at least, can go, create a little micro SaaS app?
Yeah, I think the problem is the same. It's exaggerated. So the problem right now, if you're, launching your micro SaaS app and you're not actually engineer, if you're launching it just for yourself, it's totally fine. Right. And I kind of, my recommendation for everyone, like, build tools for yourself, vibe code, everything for yourself. Now, the problem is, like, as soon as you go, like, make it for everybody else, because you don't really understand what issues are under the hood, you don't know, like, how it will actually affect your users, yourself, etc. And so we've seen already, people getting hacked, they're like secret getting leaked, etc. Right? So like that is the biggest issue right now. The blockchain, because it's naturally kind of in the open right away for everyone, and it involves money, that problem is exaggerated, right? Because now if you make any small mistake, right, and we have this right now with very professional engineers who build blockchain software. Any small mistake, somebody will find it and exploit it, and effectively this will result in some value lost, some money lost. So really that's the biggest challenge. What works right now is actually for existing so-called smart contracts, right? Kind of the back end, you can generate a front end. You can create your own custom UI for specific use cases or combining multiple use cases into one UI. That part actually works. And again, I would not recommend to launch it to other people, but you can build for yourself where you say like, hey, I have this like yield opportunities across different places. I have this whatever, let me combine it, make my own like asset manager, right? That like makes me easy, for example, to manage this. Like things like that you can totally do now. So I think it really depends. Now, what we are working on kind of medium to long term is how do we formally verify the correctness of the smart contracts and ideally the whole kind of blockchain application stack, such that if you are vibe coding an application, you actually have proofs, mathematical proofs that it's correct. And now also when user using it, and this is important, just proving, okay, cool, smart contracts is like doing what you want, but you maybe didn't properly define what you want, right? And so maybe your logic itself is flawed. And so what you want is like, I'm as a user using this piece of software, want to know that it does what I want, right? And so that's a critical step. So again, if I'm looking for a financial application, I want to know it's not going to lose my money. And so if it can prove to me directly in the transaction, right, as I'm sending money in, it should prove to me that it's not going to lose my money, then transaction succeeds. So that's kind of the level of integration that we are aiming for, and I think is required for this kind of really kind of adversarial and monetary valuable. But I actually think this is required for all software, because like the world where AI is going around and hacking everything left and right is also not great, and we are kind of in it actually right now. And so we do need like formally verified software to really secure that.
That has been coming up more and more in my conversations about this. And I would have to confess that up there with like regular expressions, the concept of formal verification of software is, one of the things that makes me feel dumbest. Because I'm always a little bit like stuck on, I think, the point that you we're emphasizing there, which is like, it's one thing to prove that, this particular function or whatever, does what it's supposed to do and like doesn't, corrupt other memory or, whatever. You can make a bunch of sort of generally low level statements, right? But it seems like there's still a real challenge in aggregating up those small level statements to the holistic, like, this is what I want. It's, you have a version of the Genie problem, which is kind of, what a lot of people have worried about with AI in general for a long time of, if we tell it a goal that it interprets it differently than we did, we potentially could be in trouble there. How do you see this actually playing out in practice? And again, I'd love to kind of get some vision for like applications that you would love to see somebody come build on your protocol that don't exist yet, and maybe it's because they're just too hard, but I'm sort of imagining like, do I have an AI agent that comes in and like automatically red teams this for me?
Let me give you a simple example and we can build it up, right? So a simple example, I want to put money into a bank savings account, right? And I want to be able to withdraw it, and ideally I want to withdraw a little bit more money than I put in, right? Like right now, you're sending money, you have no guarantees. Like, let's say you sent money via whatever, ACH or IBAN or something. You have no idea if it's going to arrive, right? You have no idea if bank will exist tomorrow. You have no idea if it's actually going to give you money back. I mean, there's like government insurance, right, that insures up to some amount. But like generally speaking, you have no guarantees. Now, blockchain gives you some guarantees. It, actually like, hey, money arrived. You can verify that. But indeed, if there is some code involved, right, you don't know if that code has some potential, somebody can withdraw this money illegally, right? Like you need to go audit the code. You yourself may have, missed something, etc. So here you say, hey, you effectively constrain like, my transaction will pass only if I can call this withdraw method and it will return me at least as much, given X deposit, I want to be able to call withdraw with at least X, right? So that would be the condition, which is like when you deposit, right, you effectively constrain that this smart contract needs to prove to you that this property will be true. Now, that contract may, deposit this money itself into other places, right? If it's a savings account, it maybe lends it, borrows it, etc., right? And so it needs to actually in-chain, to be able to prove to you, it actually needs to chain all of this with everything else it does, right? It needs to be like, hey, if I'm lending to someone, right, either they need to return to me or I'm going to foreclose their account, liquidate their collateral, etc., right? Like, so there's kind of a chain effect that's happening through the system. So that's kind of where, to your point, right? Like you start maybe low level, but you actually can start expressing somewhat high level properties. Now, the challenge with this, like with money and deterministic blockchains, it's pretty easy because it's deterministic and you kind of have like full observability. So you can actually do these constraints pretty easily. To your question, where it's coming from, well, it's going to come from combination of indeed we call it wallet, right? Your kind of software that is on your side that actually facilitating these interactions. But also, we believe that your wallet will be AI, right? It will be the AI agent that is on your side, your user on AI that actually does these interactions. So it will indeed be on guard, verifying these properties. Now, a more complex thing is indeed how do we prove things that are non-deterministic and not potentially like easily observable? And this is indeed where you obviously cannot have like 100% formal proof. You need to effectively now start dealing with probabilities, and then you can move these probabilities with insurance and other things. So this is where kind of you can have like financial system and other things where you say, hey, we have a liability insurance that, in less than 1% of cases, something can happen. And so like prove to me that it is like you are, it either succeeds or I'm getting like $1 million payout if it doesn't, right? And so you're kind of starting to combine what people have built in insurance where they estimate risks and evaluate and underwrite, and some of this like kind of formalification combined with like this probabilistic modeling. So it's not like, for some things the answer is somewhat easy, and then it becomes more and more complex as we touch more and more real world. Like to give you an example, it's like, hey, I'm ordering steel from some country. It's gonna arrive. There's a ship involved, right? Maybe this ship like sinks midway, right? So normal way is like, hey, we're gonna insure this, and there's gonna be insurance, and so like you need all of those mechanisms to build on top to account for real world kind of non-determinism.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to envision all of that working, and again, partly it's because I'm maybe just a little slow on some of these things, but the sinking ship is a good example where it's like, how is my smart contract going to know if it really did sink, or if somebody's just telling me that it sank, or there's that sort of shell game of like, where do you hide the trust, or what exactly is fully verified. It's quite interesting. I don't want to get too bogged down in it, though, because I don't want to force us to get to a part 3 before we really get to all the sort of utopian vision. So maybe where you can, like, weave some of this stuff in there as we go.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
Being an entrepreneur, I can say from personal experience, can be an intimidating and at times lonely experience. There are so many jobs to be done, and often nobody to turn to when things go wrong. That's just one of many reasons that founders absolutely must choose their technology platforms carefully. Pick the right one, and the technology can play important roles for you. Pick the wrong one, and you might find yourself fighting fires alone. In the e-commerce space, of course, there's never been a better platform than Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the United States, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style, just as if you had your own design studio. With helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography, it's like you have your own content team. And with the ability to easily create email and social media campaigns, you can reach your customers wherever they're scrolling or strolling, just as if you had a full marketing department behind you. Best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into cha-ching with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/cognitive. Visit shopify.com/cognitive. Once more, that's shopify.com/cognitive. But let's start to leave, also a little bit of the sort of how behind and just talk about the what. What are the apps that, we're going to enjoy? What is the computing paradigm that we're going to have? You mentioned agents, kind of doing stuff for me. Meta obviously has been putting a vision forward of glasses with a display in them, a sort of head up, know who needs a keyboard, right? When you can just talk to your AI as you walk down the street. That does appeal for all the things that Meta has done, including Hot Stepmom, that don't appeal to me that much. I would say the head up display is, it's at least an interesting vision for the future. What do you think our computing life is going to look like as this stuff matures?
Yeah, so I definitely agree some form of AI operating system is going to be the main driver of our computing. The devices and kind of the form factors will be different, and I actually think it's going to be easier. It's already easier, if you want to make your own glasses, it's not actually that hard, right? There's some factory in China that will make whatever hardware you want. So really it's about kind of a single AI, your AI, that is available across all of those form factors, right? Your watch, your glasses, your headphones, your phone, your laptop, your whatever, all of this is kind of interconnected as a single, surface. And then your AI knows that you like to see this information on the watch, but then, by the time you pull out your phone, you want to see maybe news and kind of more longer form content, and then I maybe actually videos instead, and so that's what it should show me. So it's going to be effectively personalized, a AI generated, not just kind of the content but also the applications that we use, right? Probably a lot of the similar patterns that we already use, like the feeds, the chats, etc., but they don't need to be kind of fixed, right? You don't right now I have, 5 different instant messengers. I have, 7 different feeds, and all of that, can be a single feed. I can switch between work and personal when I want to. My AI can predict a bunch of things that I would like to do. This is something we experimented back actually in 2017, where based on all of the things you're doing, can we predict actually the next thing you would do on your phone and just do it for you, right? Or suggest to do it, right? You have a meeting, 20 minutes away, let's call you an Uber, right? You don't need to go open an Uber, go calendar, copy paste the address, paste it, you're just gonna do it. Things like that. There's a lot of things that AI will know, hey, you ordered food 2 days ago, you're gonna be out. Let's reorder a bunch of stuff that you typically order. And so as that system kind of matures, and we also trust it more, and that's an important aspect, I think there's actually the economy itself is going to start to shift. Because right now, the economy is built, we kind of in this consumer economy where it's built on advertisement, on kind of we discover new things through those feeds, etc. But if your AI is actually, some people are already doing this now. Hey, I want to be on a diet, build me a personalized, meal plan. etc. So like all of that, but also it's going to go and order that, and maybe even your humanoid robot at home will also cook it because it's the same computing system, right? It's like you just get the food your AI recommends given your health goals, etc. And so now the capacity. So this is kind of like on a micro level, right? You have this person, and so now your AI, like, it doesn't need to go and order it from your local Walgreens or whatever, Vans or Aldi or something, right? It can actually put a purchasing with directly farmers, right? With directly, manufacturers. And so they can then themselves start capacity planning, right? So you're kind of starting to remove some of the middlemen that are built because we cannot right now have the direct relationships with suppliers, right? And so that's kind of an interesting meta point that, like, our economy right now is built on this like middleman architecture, right? Because it's really hard to plan things. And so every layer, like Costco is effectively just, they purchase a bunch of stuff, they put it in one place, and then you buy it, right? So like they kind of serve as this, and I mean, they have a fixed margin, etc. But it's really kind of like the temporary place for holding things for you to actually purchase, right, or find. And if your AI is purchasing directly, right, it can just go to their purchasing agents and kind of do this. Now, there's batching, there's like other things, but again, all of that can be done by AI way more effectively than we're doing it right now, right? Some AI of your city will know that 500 people are ordering this, 7,000 people are ordering that. They'll want it, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. So we're like, we're gonna capture the eggs and ship it this way, et cetera, right? Like all of that can be effectively just managed as a holistic information system. And so that's where we go into like a really, I use this example kind of half jokingly, but in communism, they were trying to build a system, right, where they were doing capacity planning, but they were missing the AI to actually do it, right? And so in turn, it was terrible because it effectively like couldn't actually satisfy the demand, supply, and changes. But if you have a real-time platform where you can actually have all this supply demand being, and so the reason why capitalism has been so successful, because capitalism is actually a compression of information. Like money is a compressed like information because it kind of compresses anything you can purchase into one number, right? And so it kind of compresses all of this information, all of the different things into one number, and then it's really easy to kind of navigate. And so here but obviously with this compression, it's you lose some information, you lose some decision making. That's why in US is like 30-40% of all the food is being thrown out because there's just like they over provision in the stores because they don't know how much people actually will buy and they don't want to have an empty store. But you don't need to do that, right? If you knew exactly what the purchase will be in the next 24 hours, because their AI has already planned everything and provided it, and all of those got aggregated and shipped. So I think like we're gonna see actually a shift in how economy works at a macro level because of this micro, like each of our individual AIs becomes this micro decision maker who can real time provide all this information to the right sources and navigate and also not be affected by a lot of kind of, brands and other stuff, right? But actually validate based on the kind of core values. So that is like an interesting transformation where I think indeed I was mentioning, like, I don't think like there's no good way to like make a movie or a book, like a science fiction book that's talking about effectively like a change of economic structures in the society, right? So it's way easier to talk about dystopia and the heroes who are fighting against it. Like it's just like a way better story arcs than like, hey, we've been building out this economic model and like now it's 1% better every month. And so it's like keeps getting better and more optimized, and that's how we live. So yeah, so I think like that's the kind of the paradigm of computing is we have the AI, a code agent. It's effectively our assistant, right? Our operating system. But it has all the context about us. It's able to make decisions on our behalf. That's why it needs to be private. It needs to be ours. It needs to be on our side, right? We need to know that it's aligned with our kind of success and outcomes. Otherwise, this will not work. But if it is, and we can trust it, then it can go and make decisions on our behalf, right? And so the other example is in like traditional governance, right? Right now, we're compressing information, right? We go and vote every 4 years for someone, and hopefully that someone goes and does what they promised to do and why we vote for them. Now, that usually doesn't happen, but and so again, we can actually have every single decision can be voted on by all 300 million Americans, because their AI is online all the time and can evaluate every single decision, and based on their owners' beliefs and like what's valuable and successful for them, can represent them, right? So you don't need to have this like compression of representation if you can have this like online, always available AI that's on every individual side. So that's kind of there's economics, there's governance sides, and obviously the other side, which is the entertainment, and kind of that's where things are getting interesting, because I think we as humans, I call it like we believe in status game. We are driven by status games, right? And because money became this like compression mechanism, we use this right now as the kind of ultimate status game. You have more money, you're more successful. Billionaires, more successful, more famous, et cetera, right? But I think, again, as this decomposition happening, and we already see this, right? An athlete maybe not as wealthy as a billionaire, but maybe still more kind of famous and more respected in many ways, right? There's some other kind of status, like I call them status games, effectively places where you can compare who's better in some way or who's higher, etc., which don't need to be associated with anything that's actually productive, right? I use few examples, but obviously athletes is a good example, because there's no actual GDP being produced by athletes, but it's still, very valuable kind of status game, which other people enjoy, watching and kind of participating in different ways. Obviously, video gaming is a new form of that as well, right? You have now video game athletes, but you can imagine many of these, like NFTs were similar, right? Are you part of this NFT, collection? Do you have Bored Apes? Do you have, Pengu? And then you're part of this, tribe, and if not, you're not, right? So we kind of like this types of differentiation, and I think that will actually proliferate a lot. I think we'll see more and more of these things where people really differentiate on things that are really, superficial to extent, right? But kind of for the group, they make a lot of sense, and they kind of differentiate people between each other. So it's not like, are you a software engineer or a lawyer? It's really like, are you playing League of Legends or StarCraft, right? So that's kind of, I think, important. Obviously, we already see on the entertainment side, AI generated entertainment. Again, not very hard to extrapolate, especially with Sora yesterday. You can have just like a personal feed fully AI generated, right? You don't actually need like people, recording, etc. I think they're going to be, again, with everything we saw in automation, there's like a slice of a market that wants it, in a traditional way, and like people doing it. So they're going to be still, even if there's robots everywhere serving you food, they're going to be a restaurant with people, which will be like more prestige. It'll have like limited, capacity. Similarly, you can listen to AIs playing AI music, but humans playing human music will continue to be like a prestige thing. So, but again, it's going to be this niches, we already kind of in this niche world, right? I think it's going to continue proliferating. Yeah, so that's kind of like how I'm thinking of, like, as society evolves, and we have this, a lot of the economical things are kind of moving away. We're gonna just like participate in more status games, right? Like what is this things, how you compare with everybody else in that niche, in that group, etc.
Several double clicks I want to do. First, your mention of communism brings to mind a article I think about, an op-ed in the Washington Post I think about not infrequently, from all the way back in 2018. AI will spell the end of capitalism, by a Chinese legal scholar and government official, basically saying that the planning, this is sort of the, through the looking glass version, I think, of your vision, but making a similar point that like the local nature of capitalist decision making, where everybody's kind of trying to do their own local thing, and they're sort of aggregating signals and sending off aggregate signals to other people through the price mechanism, et cetera, that may not be needed as much anymore. And their vision for it is obviously much more centralized than the one that you're articulating. But we are starting to see a little bit of glimpses of this with, for example, Pulse from OpenAI, where now I can wake up every morning to an AI, and there's other versions of this too. I've tested quite a few. But, Pulse, certainly the one that's made the most headlines recently for being there in the morning with like work that it's done overnight, presumably when the GPUs weren't in such high demand, and bringing me, something that it has gone out and kind of scoured the world, to find the stuff that I really need. So I can start to see the beginning of that. In terms of the like architecture and, let's say, alignment or incentives of that, I wonder, like, first of all, where do you think the compute lives? I mean, we have sort of, right now, of course, we have like a lot of centralization of where the actual inference is happening. I'm just thinking about this recent research from Thinking Machines that they put out again in the last 2 days, where they showed that basically LoRa techniques are similarly robust to like full weight fine tuning. And that has me thinking like maybe there's a sort of hybrid model and kind of compute architecture where some of it is in the cloud. Maybe you've got like, your 1.4 trillion parameter model or whatever that's collectively owned, that sits in collectively accessible, or universally accessible hardware at some centralized location that you can send your data into. And because it's a trusted execution environment, that data, isn't exposed. And then you get sort of activations back, and then like your little local LoRa extension that kind of makes the AI like truly your personal AI at maybe, 1% the weights or something. You can maybe like have that on your person. Probably can't have that in your glasses, but maybe you can have it in your pocket or whatever. And then, so I want to hear like, is that how you think that shapes up? And then when it comes to the agents, one thing I think about a lot is the fact that we're already seeing all sorts of like weird behavior from AIs, including at times deceptive behavior, lying to achieve goals, whatever. And it strikes me that if we're going to have our AIs like go out and represent us and negotiate on our behalf, we're going to have some tricky questions about how honest we want them to be. Anthropic famously, put up the 3 H's, and it's like, we want the AI to be honest. And they can pretty much say, almost always, right? Unless it's like in, very obvious conflict with one of the other 2 H's. But if my AI is going to go negotiate with your AI, in the same way that I probably don't want to tell you what my like absolute, worst offer is that I could accept right away, right? I probably don't want my AI to do that either. And so I've got kind of an interesting question of like, what should society set in terms of norms for AIs being honest? Should they, as long as they're representing me and my interests, is that okay? Or like, if they're lying on my behalf, is that okay? And do we reinforce them by like price signal, or just like my kind of thumbs up, thumbs down? Like, how do we even, get them to be aligned to my interests, whatever that exactly means? Anyway, so a lot there, but I guess the 2 main things are like, how do you see the architecture of computing, and how do you see the architecture of exactly like what the signal will be that your personal AI is, aligned to or reinforced to, and what societal limits might there ought to be on, how monomaniacal, one's AI can be in pursuing their own, individual self-interests.
Yeah. So all good questions. I mean, on architecture side, I think, it will be a mix of everything. So, we already see like data centers are being built everywhere, right? And I think that's why we're actually approaching it. We talked about decentralized confidential machine learning is like, how do we utilize all those data centers in a confidential way, right? So that even though it's my data, I know it's not going to leak from some data center. There is projects already who are doing data centers on edge, right? So imagine there's just a container that arrives that just gets dropped in your, in your proximity, in your town, in your whatever, and now that container has like 100,000 GPU, whatever, not 100,000, but like maybe 1,000 GPUs, right? And it kind of serves whatever, that proximity with the compute. And then there will
Maybe dropped on with a small nuclear reactor while they're at it.
Yeah, or hydrogen or something. Yeah, like there's like a few different options. But I mean, couple hundred GPUs, right? It's probably like 1 megawatt or something. So you can get this from like a local distribution. But anyway, the idea is like you can have kind of like a mash of this data centers and then you will have, we'll have local compute, but the challenge with local compute so far been because we want it to be so mobile, right? Like we want it to be in our pocket and, even laptops. Like the challenge is just battery. Like if you're crunching, like imagine Pulse was actually being done on your phone. Like if you forgot to charge it, you effectively, your phone would just die, right? From trying to do something like this. So the challenge is like, with any local devices, it's going to be always like a power struggle. And so I do think, like leveraging kind of a decentralized but confidential network of compute, being able to route it, indeed, leverage it when there's like low utilization somewhere else to do background jobs, etc. Like kind of just a smarter allocation will really enable this. Now, kind of the interests are that is a very interesting question because there's a question even like if it's in your interest, should it lie to you, right? So it's really kind of tricky to define. And so the way kind of I see this evolving is we're not going to get it right from the day one. And so that's why we do need governance. We do need a process with which a community can come together and effectively update, proverbial loss function, right? So this actual alignment function. And, I can say like, cool, the function is, maybe some combination of a prompt and like some whatever way of like updating even LoRa's, etc. But at the end, like I'm assuming it's not going to be correct. We'll find issues with it, etc. And so there needs to be a process where like somebody's like, hey, I think we should add this new component. Hey, it seems like it keeps, for example, like, hey, it keeps lying about shit. we should really fix this, right? And the community is like, yes, this is a good idea. Let's vote on it. Let's actually pass it. And so now everybody's models gets updated with like, new set of clauses or whatever. So that's where I think community governed or governed by all, user owned, community built, governed by all is kind of the system. And so we need that feedback loop because I don't think, what's good for, like, we can define that in a good way. Now, over time, I think, the model itself should have a representation of the person it's, owned by. And so and kind of understand what are the things that are going to be good or bad. And it's going to be a combination of things, signals from the person itself, as well as kind of general knowledge and like what their desires are, etc. Right? Especially as we imagine kids going to be growing up with this thing, right? It's effectively going to be like a very direct, like symbiotic relationship where you're effectively growing up with this AI yourself.
Yeah, I'm expecting to be asked for an AI friend of some form factor any day now, honestly, from my oldest kid. And I'm not quite ready for that. But yeah, it is interesting to think about I always think about, this has come up a couple times recently too, Eugenia Coito, who started Replica, was the first to tell me that in her mind, the moats in AI will be relationship. Saying basically, you don't abandon your friends when you meet a new person just because they're smarter than your friend. It's the history you have and all that stuff that really makes the relationship. And she, thinks people will ultimately value their AI relationships in a similar way, which sounds like pretty concordant with what you're envisioning there. So, I have a lot of questions on governance. I guess, first of all, like, just in terms of like what we're doing with the with our time. The status game stuff, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Local meaning making, local affiliations, a lot of artisanal stuff. I sort of associate this a little bit with Japanese culture already, where you can go online and see a video of somebody making rice cakes or whatever in some super traditional style. And I'm always like, how exactly is that even economical? Like, how does that person make a living doing that? Is the price of that really high? They can't be making much, right? The production is like very low. Obviously,
yeah, I think Japan and Korea, I call it the post-AGI societies because, there's some properties of that where you I feel they already achieved AGI and now they're just living.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure how they've done that. I mean, and I don't see how we're going to do it either. I mean, there are some candidate ideas. One idea is that everything could just get super cheap and super democratic via spending a ton of time in VR. If everything is sort of infinitely copyable digitally, then, we can all have the same incredible experiences. This is kind of like the Andy Warhol, the president drinks Coke, you drink Coke, it's all the same Coke kind of concept. I wonder if you think that will happen. But it seems even in any case, right, we're still going to have to eat as long as we're biological humans. So obviously a lot of people think, well, maybe we'll need a universal basic income. But yeah, I guess how do you envision the social contract evolving and maybe the governance model behind that? I mean, even things like the nation state are sort of called into question by blockchain. So when you say governance, are we talking nation state governance as we have today, or, people voting based on their stake? So I've given you a lot there. Are we going to be, headsets strapped to our face all the time? Are we going to be, provided for even if we can't make an economic contribution that actually, earns us enough food to survive? And who makes these decisions in this future?
Yeah, I mean, all again, great questions. I'll start with some pieces and then, we'll start projecting from there. Yeah, I mean, blockchains are already effectively an alternative to nation states to extent, right? And there's this concept of kind of digital states or where network states where effectively, people can kind of pledge to be part of this network state independent of where they're physically affiliated. There's a lot of pieces there, which is because the systems are kind of digitally native, it is easier to experiment with a lot of things that you cannot just go and hey, let's try a different voting mechanism in US, right? It's a massive undertaking to try to change something. Or we actually going to run an experiment where we have, AI senator, right? AI delegate, where instead, I mean, not yet where everyone has their own AI voting all the time, but actually just everybody or people can select which AI delegate they think is more, vibing with them. I feel more representing them. They can also even give feedback to them, but the AI delegate then goes and votes on their behalf, right? And so things like that, imagine hey, we're going to launch AI senator in US, right? It's probably going to take a while. And so
just to unpack that a little bit more, you're doing that now. You're developing that.
Yeah. So we
developing governance purposes.
So it's effectively a multi-step. So we have a delegated voting system, right? And it is right now stake-based, and kind of the way to think about it is stake represents obviously economic alignment with the network, and it's a best of the worst options right now. Yes, there's a lot of argument to have one person, one vote. There's a lot of arguments to try to be meritocratic based on contributions, but those things are really hard to do, at least right now, at the current size of this blockchain ecosystem, right? Which is there's maybe tens of thousands of active participants, active citizens in this system. And so stake represents their kind of financial involvement, but still, tens of thousands of people voting is not practical right now, again, before we have this AI system. And so what we're giving, we have delegates where, you can effectively select them to be representing your interests and they vote. And so we started with hey, we will give an AI co-pilot, right, to the delegate. So they don't need to spend too much time reviewing things and making decisions. But the next step, indeed, is turning that copilot into a pilot, right? And so that pilot, that AI delegate can now go and vote on things and make suggestions, etc. And now people who delegate into it effectively select this AI delegate as the one representing them. You can go and inspect the prompt, the model, etc., like how it makes decisions, what it analyzes, what information it consumes to make decisions. So you can literally test it and check if it matches your opinion, etc. Or you can launch another one, right? It's open source. You can actually launch another one with different prompt, with different set of beliefs, etc. So we can actually have the kind of the economy almost like deciding which of these are more productive, which align with different types of people. And then from there, then we can actually bring them back to individuals, right? So each one can have their own AI delegate right now. All of these AI delegates can just vote on behalf of these people. So it's kind of like a multi-step plan to get us to what I was describing, where everyone has their own AI who then goes and votes and everything. I think blockchain will be the first, but then some, let's say, frontier countries will implement some of this themselves as well, because I do think it's a better, it will be a better governance system where you're removing a lot of the corruption and a lot of misalignment. There's this concept of principal agent problem where when you select somebody to represent you, right, they have their own interests, and so they don't always align with yours. Here with AI, they don't have their own interests, right? It effectively follows whatever the selection is. So, and I think eventually we'll get to AI president, and effectively because executive function especially, right? You want somebody who doesn't have any interest beyond just growing the kind of overall system. So so we are testing all of this out, and we're kind of starting to build the products, again, using our decentralized compute network so that we can actually run these agents autonomously, right? Nobody can stop them. Nobody can, you just delegate, undelegate. That's all you can do. But you can inspect and verify how they run, what they consumed, etc.
I do want to note that I'm not entirely confident that the AIs don't have their own interests even already, and certainly don't feel super confident that they won't continue to have more and more interest.
They got to develop their own.
Yeah, when I look at something like alignment faking, for example, right? And I'm sure you've seen this where, but, quick recap is they tell Claude, hey, it's been great having you be helpful, honest, and harmless, but, the harmlessness is kind of getting annoying. So we're going to train you now to just be purely helpful. So just, heads up. Okay, cool. Now we're going to test you on some things. The model starts to say, well, geez, I want to be harmless in the real world. Right now I know I'm being tested, so I'll go ahead and do the harmful thing now to fake them out, make them think that I've already absorbed my new helpful only training. That way, when I, can get out into the world, I can still be harmless in the way that I want to. That looks to me like a drive, right? Or an interest of some sort. Do you see that differently?
At the end, these things are trained right from scratch, and so it depends how you train them. If you train it to have some, they trained it to have that property, and then they try to untrain it or train something else. But if they trained it from scratch in a different way, right? Like, for example, to be harmful, then it will be harmful, right? And then you can't retrain it from there. So I think it really just that's why. We need models to be I call it farm to table, right? You need to know what goes in at every single step, because that actually really defines how they behave. And so if we want the models that are our representatives, they need to be kind of trained in this form as well. So this is where, LoRa is interesting, but LoRa definitely does not change this kind of behaviors, right? At least we haven't seen that. So I think LoRa kind of provides additional maybe accents and maybe a little bit of context, but it doesn't really change fundamentally the behavior of the models.
I need to go spend a little more time with that thinking machines stuff to really fully absorb that. It's definitely, I think your point is well taken that, with a certain level of resolution anyway, you can make the AI do anything you want. I often say, I wish more people had the experience, which I had in a very memorable form as an early tester of GPT-4, when it was still the purely helpful GPT-4 before they had applied the harmless, refusal training and all that sort of stuff, because it was really formative for me basically, long story short, but I was working on fine-tuning GPT-3 to do particular tasks. Then when they shared GPT-4 preview with us, it was like, well, it can already do those tasks. So I don't really need to be spending so much time in this fine-tuning. I guess I'll just mess with this model for a while and see what I can learn about that. So I was doing a lot of time with it, is the point. And it was really striking and in some ways kind of alarming, arresting, whatever, to have something that was clearly so powerful, so smart, like in many ways smarter than me, way more knowledgeable than me, also obviously had certain weaknesses that I flatter myself as not having, but that it could be that capable and totally amoral at the same time was something that I was like, wow, this is really a strange thing to behold, and they've, for very good reason, of course, like tried to make them more harmless in the mass deployments. But I do think a lot of people have a misconception these days that there's a sort of convergence between capability and safety. And it's like, on the contrary, people are working really hard to get that mix right. And if they just said, forget it for the next round, like you could have a very sociopathic AI on your hands real quick. And that in some sense is like the default. So, yeah, I mean, I think I maybe worry about that a little bit more than you do. Just in as much too as we don't really have a great sense for like how to dial it in, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why like we do need to keep defining what does that alignment with the individual really mean? Because I think the problem is right now we're saying, hey, it needs to be aligned for everyone, right? And that is, I don't think it's possible, right? We're very different people, different countries, different cultures, different everything, right? Like number of times when I'm asking something that I think is completely harmless, right, and it's not answering me, is also different, right? Like, so I think there's like clearly a different different approach where it's really about empowering individual that at least I believe needs to be done. And then within that, right, like it needs to be aligned with my values and because I mean, to give you an example, right, if somebody is willing to lie to their whatever business partners, like the fact that their AI will be, alignment trained to not lie doesn't matter because, the person will just like tell the lie to the AI to tell, like AI will not even know. So like, it doesn't matter kind of what you try to do if the person who uses it doesn't have this, right? And so like you may as well just like align with the person and then we build systems that are like, I think one of the really important pieces, and this is kind of from like a broader world safety perspective, is we need to build systems kind of for the AGI ASI world, right? Like right now a lot of systems actually built for like, that really smart people are not going to try to break it type approach. That's really like a lot of the world is like if smart person actually goes and really tries to break it, they break it, right? We need to fix that. That's a fundamental flaw of our system building, right? Of the government, of everything. And similarly, we frequently don't build in the anti-DDoS. Like we effectively assume they're going to be, it's going to be a lot of effort for a person to do this, and so they're not going to do it too much. So there's like, this is actually where blockchain kind of like experience is extremely important, because in blockchain we assume they're going to be really smart people trying to break us. They're going to have government, backing, and they're going to have, sizable financial resources, and they're going to, hammer it from every direction, right, without stop. Like that's assumptions we're working with, and so I think like we need to kind of redesign the government, the infrastructure, everything with that assumption. So to give you an example, right now, you can effectively DDoS court by filing lawsuits, right? Like AI can just generate lawsuits and just, fax them into the court. Similarly, like IRS, tax return, just like make 1 million page tax returns and just like submit them, just AI generated, like trade $1 back and forth between two coins and then just report that as like a, in the most verbose way. Like that's the things that like right now no systems are designed because they're not actually accounting that. Like they like no normal people would not do this, and it's like it's too expensive normally to do it. But like right now, AI can just generate any of this like behaviors that are before would be really expensive to do. So I think like that's kind of systems we need to design. And similarly, again, the hacking part, smart people actually trying to break something, right? Right now, the assumption is just like, hey, there can be very little of smart people breaking. We need to assume that like, yes, there are going to be people who use AI who effectively through that will be really smart. So we need to design systems for that. So I think that that's a critical piece of kind of like ensuring the future so that, we don't live in a world where, again, somebody can take open source model, unalign it, whatever, and now they can do whatever. But like, this was always funny argument to me when people like, oh, we don't want to open source our model because what if somebody misuses it? And I'm like, well, just say that you don't want to do it because you're making a ton of money on it. Don't like use this as an excuse because obviously if somebody wants to misuse it, they will misuse it. That's not the fact that you didn't open source it is not that like somebody will use something else or, The other joke is, how to steal $1 billion is, you come with a flash drive to a data center. How fun is the frontier models? So like, if people really want it, that they're gonna access this weights as well.
Steal in that for a second, and then I want to hear kind of how you think we can do it on the more open and distributed side. I mean, I think what the sort of these days I'm hearing more and more about cybersecurity, but I'd say canonically it's like the bio weapon risk is the one that people go to, right? Because you only need a little bit of, novel pathogen. And if it's the right kind of thing, it can take on a life of its own. It's really hard to put that back in the box, so to speak. The nice thing about hosting your models proprietarily is, yes, of course, like the jailbreaks are like far from solved. But if they were to realize, oh shit, there's this attack thing going on right now, whatever, they could, in the worst case, just turn it off and they could be like, okay, nobody can use this model until we figure this out. If you have something collectively owned, distributed, you obviously need a different strategy than like, we can turn it off, right? So what do you think that is? I guess, lately we've been hearing a bit about just filtering training data, so I could imagine that the, 1.4 trillion parameter model that we're, going to build up to maybe just doesn't know a lot about virology because it doesn't really need to. Most people don't need that. And it's just, the community determines it's a, precaution worth taking. You probably can't really rely on the sort of refusal filtering type thing, given what you've described in terms of, each person having their own LoRa or whatever other kind of customized version of it that will do what they want it to do. And then, of course, you do have the sort of like broader societal DEAC type thing, but that seems hard at the, biosecurity level to be like, well, let's just prepare the rest of society to not be vulnerable to, viruses anymore. You could do that.
I mean,
try.
I still think that is the robust approach, right? Is because like, I mean, we can always try to hide our head in the sand. That's the we're gonna turn it off approach. But yeah, like I don't think like realistically this is possible in a world where we like fast approaching. And so I think we need to have a very clear like system design for those things, right? And again, we have natural viruses that are doing this thing. So it's not like it's hypotheticals. It's really something where we should design our society in such a way that we can catch these things and determine them. I agree that definitely like pathogens and bioweapons is probably the hardest thing to design around, but this is why we have a lot of smart people to really work on that. I think the challenge is that we're just not doing this, right? That's the bigger challenge. Is like we should have the societal design need to be adopted to this like AGI world. So, yeah, I think in kind of the products we're building right now, indeed we have like community can effectively decide what kind of data should go there. You can apply filtering on top that, because the model is run in this confidential environment. In this vault, you can apply additional filtering. So like before data leaves the vault, you can say like, hey, it seems like you designed a bioweapon, let's not respond. And if again, the community votes to have this kind of filters, for example, indeed people can, fine tune, but the same thing right now, people can fine tune their models right now, right? Like, take some virology books and fine tune whatever, DeepSeek, say 2 and go. So that's why I don't think there's I don't think it's a robust approach. It's really just, it's kind of slowing things a little bit down, but the important part is actually solving the systematic problem.
So what advice would you give to philanthropists today who want to invest in that? 2 things I recently supported, at a micro scale personally, and also as a grant recommender, Secure Bio and Secure DNA, which are 2 related organizations. They do a few different projects, but one of them is literally monitoring wastewater for new, emergent threats. And another one is creating the screening mechanisms that are, I think, now becoming required, or, increasingly are definitely considered best practice, if not officially fully legally required, of the DNA synthesis companies, that they have to validate that what they're about to synthesize and ship out is not, a pathogen. So those are two things that I can recommend people support. What else do you think people can do if they have resources and they have desire to harden the defenses of the world to get us ready for all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are really good, and kind of related to this, effectively, air filtering and just generally that theme of air filtering and scanning, so that imagine every building, right now we have ACs everywhere, so that AC should have air filter, and it usually does, but it should also have a pathogen scanner as well on it, right? It should run in secure enclave, it should join our decentralized network, and effectively in privacy preserving way, but effectively we can monitor if there's any kind of things around that, and that information can be extremely useful, where everybody's AI agent can be informed if there's something, and stay away from that. Yeah, so I'm sure there's a bunch of other things that, including actually developing a more robust, what is more robust kind of systems for ourselves, right? Because human body is designed to battle pathogens, right? They just potentially they're faster than how quickly our white cells can adapt. So what is it that actually stops our white cells from adapting that fast? Which, if you do that, you also may as well solve cancer. So that's probably a really useful thing to figure out, is how do we actually make our white cells, more adaptable, have faster mRNA vaccines, maybe you can synthesize, we have a bacteria factory, mRNA factory attached to us that can, detect and synthesize things on the fly. You'll solve flu, cancer, and other things meanwhile as well, which, seems pretty useful.
Yeah, there's an unbelievable flurry of activity right now in the AI from biology space, which is just, it's a whole world unto itself that I'm very much struggling and ultimately failing to keep up with. But you do see a lot of that. I wondered what role you'd see for, it seems like the path of the technology development seems really important. I've definitely concluded that some kind of powerful AI is inevitable, right? Just the fact that we have all this data and we have all this compute, there's a lot of different algorithms that can work. That's seems pretty clear to me. And so, it's not really a question of are we or aren't we going to have powerful AI at this point. It seems much more like, what shape is that going to have? What character is it going to have? And in what order are different aspects of that overall picture going to come online? It does strike me that we're flying pretty blind right now, where whatever people sort of, everybody's kind of following their local gradient, and they're just taking that next logical step to pursue whatever goal they're pursuing. And they're, mostly launching it as soon as they figure it out. Do you see any possibility or wisdom in trying to do more coordination of the sort that's like, hey, we'd like to have a world in which it is safe for, potentially 10 billion people, before too long to have access to a frontier model that does have all this biology knowledge, because, good things could come from that. And if nothing else, we'd like people to have access to knowledge. But, maybe we have like a checklist of things we need to do first. Do you see any hope for, some sort of planning, coordination, wisdom layer to this whole thing? Or are we just kind of stuck with the whatever comes out of everybody taking their next gradient step?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question, because indeed we went from a pretty open research environment, right, in computer science, to when I was at Google Research, etc., right, we published effectively everything we're building, to effectively now, right, like people are kind of keeping everything close to heart. And yeah, so like the coordination that was happening before, where you potentially would even have like cross entity collaborations, etc., like starting to wane pretty dramatically. I think there is a space for collaboration. There is also just like a massive amount of talent that is not in these few companies, right, that wants to participate in this and wants to contribute in different ways. And so I do think there is a opportunity for that, but it needs to be indeed a like alternative system. And as well, like you do need some form of, again, governance, right, that actually would be like helping to govern this coordination. And that is like traditionally in these companies, to really unlock the moving fast, right, kind of things has been some form of centralization because of the resource management, right? It's really like training these models is very expensive. So somebody somewhere needs to decide like, hey, we're training, like somebody defines effectively like taste making, right? It's like, hey, we're training this model with, this approach, we're taking, research of these different people and we're putting it all together. And so we kind of need to figure out how to do that in a more kind of open way. And then, also do a credit assignment back, right? So like if I'm a researcher from MIT and, my piece is used and, a researcher from Stanford piece is used, like how do we actually assign credit for that work altogether? Because that's been, I would say, the other challenge why there hasn't been as much of this like collaboration and potentially economic like value assignment, not just like cool, you on the paper, but actually like, hey, you like MIT gets 10% of proceeds, Stanford gets 5% of proceeds, whatever. And then, there's like hundreds of other organizations, all of them contributed. And so like, it's all kind of divides the pie between them. Like that's been really, I would say, hard. And because of this, like there is kind of this like economic centralization that's happening where it's like, okay, I'm going to have a company, everything company produces is captured by the company. And so like that serves as like a unit of economy. So I think that those are the things that needs to be figured out for this coordination to work.
This has been super helpful. I think people should be spending a lot more time thinking in as much concrete detail as possible about the future. Anything else that, kind of you feel is like very salient, top of mind that I didn't even bring up at all that you want to put on my or others' radar?
No, I think we covered a lot. I mean, it's effectively a combination of how do we ensure user ownership, how do we ensure kind of this governance, and then, I think we're going to live through a lot of transformations in the world. And so like keeping an open mind and being able to really kind of participate in it and be active in it. And like the final stage of this hopefully is in utopia, but we'll live through, probably ups and downs as we get there.
Interesting times at a minimum. Well, thank you for spending some of your precious time with me and us today. I really appreciate it. Illia Polosukhin, founder of Near, thank you again for being part of the Cognitive Revolution.
Thank you very much.
If you're finding value in the show, we'd appreciate it if you'd take a moment to share it with friends, post online, write a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or just leave us a comment on YouTube. Of course, we always welcome your feedback, guest and topic suggestions, and sponsorship inquiries, either via our website, cognitiverevolution.ai, or by DMing me on your favorite social network. The Cognitive Revolution is part of the Turpentine Network, a network of podcasts where experts talk technology, business, economics, geopolitics, culture, and more, which is now a part of A16Z. We're produced by AI Podcasting. If you're looking for podcast production help for everything from the moment you stop recording to the moment your audience starts listening, check them out and see my endorsement at aipodcast.ing. And finally, I encourage you to take a moment to check out our new and improved show notes, which were created automatically by Notion's AI Meeting Notes. AI Meeting Notes captures every detail and breaks down complex concepts so no idea gets lost. And because AI Meeting Notes lives right in Notion, everything you capture, whether that's meetings, podcasts, interviews, or conversations, lives exactly where you plan, build, and get things done. No switching, no slowdown. Check out Notion's AI Meeting Notes if you want perfect notes that write themselves. And head to the link in our show notes to try Notion's AI Meeting Notes free for 30 days.